The price of oil will affect the cost of a variety of goods and services. One of the first and most obvious is the automobile industry. Just this past week, we saw General Motors announce a complete restructuring of its manufacturing process. GM will manufacture fewer and fewer SUVs over the next 5 years and refocus its energy on passenger cars. We've also seen an increase in hybrid cars and other fuel-efficient vehicles, which consumers seem to be more interested in buying in lieu of high gasoline prices. Oil prices will also affect how much people pay for goods on a day-to-day basis. A lot of the things we purchase is imported from overseas. However, these import costs will increase as transportation costs increase. Unfortunately, the U.S. doesn't have domestic manufacturing capacity to produce a lot of these goods here, so consumers will have to either pay increased prices to cover increased shipping costs, or they'll have to do without. In addition, oil is a common product used in food production. Many fertilizers are derived from petrochemicals, and so we can expect to pay increased food prices as the cost to produce food goes up. In addition, food like corn is being used for ethanol and other biofuels, so we're seeing increased price pressure there. And this will gradually spread to the rest of the world as well, as America does produce a lot of the food exported to other countries. The same economic forces driving oil prices higher will also affect other commodities as well. We've already looked at how gold prices have increased, but we'll see similar increases for other commodities like silver or coal. In addition, electrical costs will increase as energy demand grows. Service industries won't be immune from oil costs either. We've already seen the effect oil prices have on the travel and transportation industries, and as these expenses increase, so will the costs to provide services to consumers. Now, industries like consulting will obviously be affected as it costs more to actually transport people from one region to another, but we'll also see increased transportation and delivery costs manifest in other ways. You'll see it in things as simple as pizza delivery, where the increased cost to actually deliver pizza will be passed on to consumers in the form of surcharges. Also, as people spend more and more on goods and services and gasoline costs, consumers will have less money to spend for less essential items, and this will impact other service providers as well. All of these smaller factors add up to macroeconomic trends, and this all boils down to an increase in inflation. As oil prices increase, inflation by definition will have to increase as consumers spend a greater and greater percentage of their disposable income on essential items like gasoline. An increase in inflation is especially troubling given the demographics of the United States. Right now, we're seeing the baby boomer generation begin to retire, and we're seeing a greater percentage of people living on fixed incomes. As these people retire, more and more of them will be living on fixed income. And as we've seen, when inflation increases, it really puts stress on those living with fixed incomes. We're already seeing some elderly people have to cut back on services like healthcare because they're spending a greater percentage of their fixed incomes on other essentials like food and transportation. This problem will only get worse as more people live on fixed incomes and as inflation and interest rate pressures continue to mount. We're already starting to see changes in people's daily habits as a result of increased oil and gasoline prices. For example, a recent ABC poll has shown that people are actually driving less, and that when they do drive, they're slowing down to try to conserve fuel. We've also seen the unfortunate effects of high oil prices in the airline industry, as carriers are trying to consolidate, removing routes, and increasing prices to try to control the costs associated with increased jet fuel prices. We're also seeing a shift in how people approach the selection of housing. In the past, people wanted to live in suburbs with lengthier commutes to work. However, in the future, as oil and gas prices increase, consumers will be less and less willing to spend more and more money on commuting to and from suburbs. We'll see people either moving to urban areas to work, or we'll see companies relocate from urban areas into suburbs. Either way, it's going to be a wholesale redeployment of resources, and it will dramatically change the way Americans view public transit and housing. Public transit provides a good segue into a discussion of what role, if any, the government should play in mitigating increased oil and gas prices. Now, one of the main things government can do is promote the use of public transit and the development of infrastructure. Local governments will be pressured to improve public transit either through subways, rail lines, or bus systems. As gasoline prices increase, more and more consumers will be willing to take public transit as the opportunity cost becomes too great. Right now is the time for governments to begin this process rather than waiting for gasoline prices to increase even further. The change in behavior will be gradual, and it's best to try to put the infrastructure in place before demand for it is too great. Another way governments could try to combat gasoline prices is to reduce or eliminate taxes. Now, personally, I think this is a bad idea because it only artificially decreases the price of oil and does nothing to abate demand. The simple fact is that we're faced with a resource that is running out, and we can't continue to artificially support demand because eventually we're going to have to take steps to reduce consumption. It's better to take these steps now while we have more time to soften the impacts, rather than artificially lower prices and make the effects much more severe later on.